Missouri mother drained a pond to find the remains of her son, who was murdered in 2015. Edward Goodwin, 32, went missing from Poplar Bluff, Missouri in the summer of 2015. In 2017, the Butler County Sheriff's Department found partial remains of her son Edward in a small lake in Poplar Bluff, after they drained most of the water during an investigation. The Sheriff's Department found enough evidence and enough remains to use as evidence against the two men suspected of killing Edward. But his mother, Connie, felt she didn't have closure until she found the rest of her son. The sheriff said authorities returned to the fall of 2021 but didn't have the equipment to drain the rest of the muddy water. I told them months ago that if they don't do it, that one of these days I'm going to do it myself, Connie said. On September 17th, Connie, her husband Ed, and Edward's son Gage, now 22, arrived at the body of water. 2 hours after they began pumping out water with a rented sump pump, they saw bones. We saw two bones sticking up, so we kept pumping, and then the next thing you know, we started seeing the concrete blocks, and then the barbed wire, and more bones. Butler County Coroner Jim Akers was called to the scene, where he dug the skeletal remains out by hand. Dental records have confirmed that the remains are Edward's. Ricky Hurt and Eldred Smith pled guilty in 2021 and are now imprisoned for the murder of their one-time friend. Edward's family still remembers him for all of his great qualities. They are now relieved they can finally give him a proper resting place.
Connie Goodwin knows the pain of loss. She understands the ache in your soul when someone you love disappears. But for Connie, the nightmare was amplified. Her son Edward vanished from their lives. Gone. It was 2015 when Edward Goodwin, a loving father and cherished son, disappeared from Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Connie's world shattered. Days turned into weeks. Weeks bled into months, then years. The unknown gnawed at Connie. The silence was just deafening. She searched. She prayed. She refused to let Edward become just another missing person case. Connie became a beacon of hope, rallying her community, plastering her son's face on billboards, desperate for answers. Edward Goodwin, a 32-year-old tile layer, was a man of simple pleasures. He adored his young son, Gage, pouring every ounce of his being into fatherhood. He was a good son, a friend, a man who wouldn't just disappear, and yet he had. The police began their investigation, but leads ran cold, tips dwindled, and the trail went ice cold. Connie refused to believe her son was gone. She organized searches, knocked on doors, and clung to the hope that Edward would walk back into their lives. But as time wore on, the grim reality began to set in. Edward wasn't coming home. In 2017, there was a glimmer of hope, but not the one Connie craved. Authorities, acting on a tip, partially drained a small pond in Poplar Bluff. There, submerged in the murky water, they found a portion of Edward's remains. The discovery confirmed their worst fears. Edward had been murdered. Two men, Ricky Hurt and Eldred Smith, were arrested and charged with his death. They had been friends with Edward, and their betrayal cut deep. The news brought a wave of agonizing relief, mixed with a fresh surge of grief. Edward was gone, taken from them in a senseless act of violence. The discovery of his remains provided some answers, but ignited a new fight for Connie. The fight to bring her son home. The authorities had recovered only a portion of Edward's remains. They promised Connie they would return for the rest. But years passed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. And still, the authorities didn't return. Connie called. She pleaded. She reminded them of their promise. Each time she was met with excuses, lack of resources, scheduling conflicts, too much red tape. Years turned into 7. 7 years of waiting, of unanswered questions. of living with the agonizing knowledge that her son's remains were still out there. 7 years of unkept promises, of feeling ignored and forgotten. The authorities might have moved on, but Connie refused to let them forget Edward, and she certainly wouldn't let them forget her. Frustrated and heartbroken, Connie made a decision. If the authorities wouldn't bring Edward home, she would. She rallied her family, her husband, Ed, a pillar of quiet strength, and her grandson, Gage, now a young man bearing the weight of his father's absence. Together, they pooled their resources, rented a sump pump, and headed to that desolate pond. It was a Saturday morning in September 2022 when they arrived at the pond. The air hung heavy with the weight of their mission. They set up the pump, the whirring of the motor a jarring counterpoint to the stillness of the water. Hour after hour they pumped, the murky water slowly receding, revealing the muddy bottom of the pond. Then a glimmer in the mud. Bones. Connie's heart lurched. They had found him. The Butler County coroner arrived, carefully retrieving the remains along with cinder blocks and barbed wire, grim reminders of the cruelty inflicted upon Edward. Dental records confirmed what Connie already knew in her heart. They had finally brought Edward home. Through it all, Connie's grandson, Gage, bore witness to his grandmother's unwavering love and determination. He had been just a boy when his father was taken from him. Now, a young man, he stood with his grandmother, united in their grief. Their love for Edward, a bond that transcended even death. Gage had missed out on so much. Fishing trips with his dad, father-son talks, the comforting presence of a parent's love. Edward's absence left an unfillable void in Gage's life. But through it all, Connie was there, a steadfast source of strength and love, determined to give Gage the closure he deserved. Connie's fight wasn't just about bringing Edward home. It was about holding those in power accountable. She spoke out against the injustices faced by families of victims, the broken promises, and the systemic neglect that had forced her to take matters into her own hands. She became an advocate for change, demanding better resources for law enforcement, more compassionate treatment of victims' families, and a system that prioritized justice and closure. Connie's story shone a light on a system that often fails those who need it most. Edward Goodwin's story is a tragedy, a life cut short by violence. But it is also a testament to the enduring power of a mother's love, a family's unwavering bond, and a community's capacity for compassion. Connie's relentless pursuit of justice is an inspiration, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope, love, and resilience can prevail. Edward's memory lives on, in the hearts of his family, in the echoes of his laughter, and in the ripple effect of his mother's fight for justice. His story is a reminder that we must never stop fighting for what is right, for those we love, and for a world where tragedies like this are not forgotten. We must demand better from our systems, support families like Connie's, and offer them the compassion and dignity they deserve.